This is really a very necessary conversation. If you've just joined us, if it's your first time to be part of Conscious Leaders, a warm welcome. Please put your names in the chat. Let's see who you are. Put your LinkedIn details, because here we like to connect with one another. Here is like where sisters come together, where we come to reflect and learn, but we also bring everybody along on this journey. For those of you that are new to Conscious Leaders is a women in leadership network, but we are all about human empowerment, responsibility, and sustainability. And we have an approach where we believe that we come to the table authentically us, whole, meaning how do we lead our lives? How do we lead change? How do we lead from within? How do we lead consciously? And how do we lead organizations and business? It is so important in the times that we are living in that we show up as who we are, so that we can lead from that departure point, because that is where true impact and true power happens. If you want to be the change in the world, show up as the authentic leader that you are. Now, I just want to say a warm welcome to everybody today. You have witnessed the first episode of our new segment called The Status Update, where we will start bringing in experts to give us a little bit of insight into systemic issues that we are facing in South Africa and the change that is happening on the ground, because doing good is good business, and there's so many incredible businesses doing amazing things on the ground. And we thought it's time to shine a spotlight on them, but also on the challenges that we need to work on together, united as a group of society. But then without further ado, and it is really such an honor with such a esteemed group of delegates, especially with board members from influential companies who are deeply invested in shaping the future of trust. But before we dive into today's discussion, I invite you to take a moment and reflect on the topic of hand. In the chat, feel free to share something meaningful about trust and its role in the world of business today. You know, what does the word trust mean to you? How do you perceive the impact on your organization or community? Let's start this dialogue together. Today, we are gathered for a very important conversation on the state of trust. Trust, as we all know, is the currency of the 21st century. It is the bedrock on which we build our lives. We trust when we choose to share our lives with a partner, when we decide to have children with a partner, when we engage in business, when we buy a particular product or service. But trust also extends beyond the personal. It's about organizations and how they treat their people, how they prioritize safety and well-being, and how they reflect their values in every action. And yet, trust is fragile. Future generations are already watching how we interact with trust. They're observing their parents' workplaces, how businesses handle their most valuable assets, people. And they're making decisions about what they see and how and who they're going to trust in the future, unconsciously or consciously. Being short-sighted about trust is not just risky, it's dangerous. The truth is no longer enough for business to speak their right words. It's about how you make people feel, how you demonstrate that trust is more than a transaction, it's a commitment. Authenticity, the buzzword of recent years, has quickly become a core value for organizations and are expected to deliver on trust. But with authenticity comes one crucial principle, and that is transparency. And that's where many organizations fall short. In the context of rising geopolitical tensions, the pullback from DEI initiatives, and the challenge of maintaining authenticity in a polarized world, trust has become a performance metric. But what happens when trust is reduced to a metric? What happens when it's no longer genuine? What does a world look like without trust? As we reflect today on these questions, I want to emphasize the fragility of trust. It's something that needs to be nurtured and protected, not just in a time of crisis, but in everyday business practice. So without further ado, please may our guests join the room. Yay, Karina, Shamila, and Bushley. Let's give them emoji love bomb. This is what we do. So send some emojis as we're going through some comments and information. Please, as we go, please can you put in questions, because whatever we're going to talk about today, your opinion, your questions is going to help shape this conversation. I don't know if there's somebody that is busy working on something and your mic is perhaps on. Please may I ask everybody to mute themselves so that we can actually have a good sound recording for this, this session. Thank you so, so much. Right. So without further ado, I'm thrilled to open the floor for a round robin reflection from our panel and our esteemed experts to help us unpack the 2025 Edelman Trust Barometer. This conversation is not to be missed. So here, without further ado, we've got, I'm so excited about that, out of the horse's mouth, Karina Carrera. She is the CEO of Edelman Africa. And she even told me her blood is blue. As you can see, she's even externalizing that blood on the outside today. But she's the CEO of Edelman Africa, and she will be sharing insights from the Edelman Trust Barometer, setting the global benchmark for institutional credibility. Then we've also got Shamila Subramani. If you have been part of the journey, she has been a panelist on ESG, and she was the one that kept on referring back to this particular report, so we had to bring her back. But she is the CEO of National Business Initiative. She's also a force of nature within sustainability, and mind the pun, she's got it behind her, but she is really all about sustainability and governance, and a leader in the global finance and climate action. And then without further ado, we've got Bushle Hanise. We've got you in the house, and I'm so excited to have you here. You are the National Head of Business Restructuring for BDO South Africa, also a tour de force, very much involved in business transformation. And also all of these ladies are award-winning women. They, every time when this time of the year, when it's time for award season, you will start seeing them collecting all of their awards and their trophies. I don't know where they are. They don't like to boast about it, but they are tour de forces in their industries, and we're very honored to have them here. So ladies, warm welcome. Are you excited?
Yes, we are.
All right.
Not with our energy, we definitely don't have a choice.
All right, so I think where we're going to start is going to be with Karina today. I think maybe take us through the reports. What are the highlights? You've been doing this report for how many years now? What changed this year? Is there something that really stood out for you this year? And take us through your insights.
Sure. Thanks, Carmen. Hi, everybody. I'm so thrilled to be with you all today. So we've been studying trust now for 25 years. So a quarter of a century. We started studying it in 2000 when we were questioning the role of NGOs, when NGOs in the US, and we're headquartered in the US firm, were really, they were protesting at the United Nations, and we looked at what we thought was, what is the role of trust in NGOs? Do people trust NGOs to do the right thing? And that was literally where our trust study was born from. So now we've grown that trust study over these 25 years to be across 27 markets around the world. 3 of those, I'm happy to say, are within Africa, South Africa, Kenya, and Nigeria. And it really is a study of the levels of trust that a society has in the 4 main institutions in a society, so that being business, government, NGOs, and the media. And we study how those change every year. So you can imagine with what's going on in the world, to mirror that, our trust results are very volatile from year to year. But I think to answer your question, Carmen, it's really about what people are seeing now, more so than it being something new or different this year, is we're seeing now the culmination of what people are referring to in our study as a series of sort of institutional failings that they are feeling from leaders in society, or traditional leaders in society, if you like. So those sort of 4 main institutions. And over the last few years, we've seen polarization, grow into discrimination, misinformation, the post-truth era. And now in our latest report, we're actually talking about grievance as really being what people are feeling around the world and how that has a direct correlation to how trusting people feel within the societies within which they operate. And obviously that's localized to some degree within each of the specific market studies. So you can see how some of this plays out with each of our various contexts in our different countries. But yeah, overall, I would say that's really what people are feeling. They're feeling the culmination of these failings. And as a result, now we're seeing that optimism for the future is dipping. And that's really sad to see, because if people are feeling like they're not getting the leadership they need, they're not having their grievances answered, they don't know who to trust, they don't know who to believe, then how do they feel optimistic or excited about a future and what a future holds for them? And that is what we want for society, because without that, how do you progress? How do you innovate? How do you kind of grab onto new things that arrive, like AI, for example? How do you get people to buy into that and believe in that if they're so fearful and anxious around who they should trust or not? So long answer to your question, Carmen, but I think that's the kind of summation from this year's study.
Thank you so much. And it's quite interesting that you mentioned that, Karina. So I saw a post during this week where a young woman posted, she says, for the first time in my life, I now have to parent my parents on deep fake and not to trust news reporters that they're seeing and what they are saying, because this is not really real content. And that was quite a big aha moment for me, because isn't that supposed to be the other way around? And how the tables have just turned around, especially this digital arena that we're surfing into, the digital waves of fake news. Shamila, what insights, and I'm interested to hear what you have seen, what surprises you, because you've been following this for many years, but also what concerns you have.
Thank you, Carmen, and thanks for having me. Such an exciting and I think very timeless topic. And I was just reflecting on the time from which the report was sort of launched, which I think Karina was at the World Economic Forum earlier this year. And the timing related to, some of the big global events that we've seen. And we know what sort of the state of upheaval we've kind of found ourselves in. And when we look at the trends within the report, some of that is actually not surprising, even though it feels very surprising every time we see new developments. But Carmen, the question that you asked about what surprised me the most, the quick answer on that one for me, or the most concerning, was the increase in the propensity for hostile activism, particularly in the youth population. And I went straight to that because many of the other trends are a little bit more of the same of what we've seen before, and not as surprising, where some of those declines have continued, and we've seen that. But I think this particular one was the most concerning for me, and even more concerning when we consider that we on the continent, that we always position as having the largest youth and growing population, and there's a huge opportunity to get the dividend of that population, extract dividend from that, in case that how can we harness that? But if that is also the same burgeoning population with an increased propensity for hostile activism on the back of many of the societal challenges we see, I think that is a big concerning one. And the hostility more than that. I think the restlessness within youth, I think some of the disillusionment is not new, but I think this propensity is a particularly troubling one. And then what does that mean? The other one for me that was a little bit surprising, not massive, but was a bit surprising, was to see the 1% drop on the trust in business. And the trend over many years has been an incline, increasing trust, and we've seen that. And whilst overall, as a collective, business is the most trusted, and we see that in the report, and NGOs being second, but the 1% drop is a little bit concerning because it's a small drop. But is that potentially the start of a bigger one? And I think that also means that we are sitting at a delicate balance right now, where all of this trust and faith that is potentially being put in business could tip the other way if we, depending on how business reacts in a state that we know right now is highly unpredictable, exceptionally difficult, and where many of the things that even we as a country have stood for, and here I mean South Africa, obviously, are even themselves being challenged and questioned. Right? And so how do we navigate a way through that? I'm not going to say more at this point, but that's some of what's concerned.
Wow, thank you so much, Shamila. Bushle, what is standing out for you?
Sure, Carmen. I didn't even know that there was such a report, I'll be honest with the audience. And I'm truly grateful for the work that Karina and the team are doing, because it was quite insightful. I actually shared it with a lot of my friends who are leaders in their own rights. And we were chatting with a friend of mine, Zama, and we were saying, oh, now when we go onto panels or we're busy talking to students in our profession, which is something, you know, Carmen, I'm very passionate about. This is something that we're going to raise and continue to highlight, that there is this global report that's out there that is actually touching on very key important things, I think, as a leader especially, because for me, when I thought about what does trust mean without even looking at the report, as a leader, I thought, sure, you know what, you sit there, you're in management in a business, and the first thing that you're doing is to find ways to maximize shareholders' investment. Link up with trust. How do your employees see your leadership in all the activities that you'll be doing, whether you're producing a product or you're turning around distressed businesses like I do on a day-to-day basis. And I thought there's actually huge alignment. You can't be running a business and people don't trust you, your stakeholders don't trust you. And I mean, on a general note, it's quite an important thing in any environment, whether you're running a profit-making business or an NPO. I did run an NPO called the African Women Chartered Accountants. And I remember very well, Carmen, one of the biggest things for me running that NPO was that not in my name will this organization ever be found wanting where money has been misappropriated. I always wanted to make sure that the stakeholders held me accountable at all times. Then I thought about, you know, with government, you know, there's a lot going on, guys. You know, we saw last week, you know, with our president meeting the other president, I don't want to name him. I was also in a conference in France where, you know, we were led by the Deputy President of South Africa, and I was in this positive environment where we were trying to find ways to unite South Africa and France and find ways to collaborate. And I was shocked at how many businesses in South Africa are led by the French and how many businesses are in France that are led by South Africa. And we never talk about the positive things. We never talk about the good things. And that comes to, I think, what Shamila just said now around, you know, we always hear reporters talking about, or was it you, Karen? I'm not sure, talking about what the news reporter said, what is the outcome of that survey and all of that survey, but we never really look at things in a positive manner. So one of the things that I picked up actually on the report was some of the positive attributes where, you know, one of the things that they spoke about was around businesses, empowering people with well-paid jobs and skills for the future. And that's something I'm very passionate about. Can we actually make sure that we empower our own people? Because for me, just trust on its own, it's about what you started with, Carmen, where you said we need to come in any environment as our authentic selves. And you know that's something that I'm very passionate about, being an authentic person, because I always struggle with trying to be Goli or trying to be Joanna. I will never be. I always have to come into any space, whether it's business, running an NPO, government. I must come in a space where I'm known to, you know, Busha is like this. I can't today be this person and tomorrow be another person. Then people will definitely not trust me. So even at my job, my team knows I don't necessarily shout or talk loud at work. But funny enough, when I'm at home, I'm known as, oh, Mama, she shouts. That's what my daughter says. You know? But for some reason, as much as in both environments, I come as my authentic self, there's always going to be that part of me that's maybe more relaxed when I'm at home. You know, I come as a mother, as a protector and all of that, but maybe when I'm at the job, at the office, and I'm doing my job, is it all about making money? Is it all about maximizing shareholders' investment and making sure that they get their dividends? But there has always to be a balance where even though I'm in two different environments, people can actually, you know, feel that is coming as the authentic self, and as a result, we can trust that she's doing a good job in any environment that she's in. So I think that was what I picked up, and those were my thoughts coming when I was going through the report.
I love that, and thank you for sharing it and giving that different perspective, because there is a positive side to trust. And also with everything happening in the media, there's actually an app called, I think it's Grounded News, where they take all of the news publications around the world, and there's actually a sentiment analysis to check the biases that are coming from each of those platforms, so that you actually can make an informed decision about the propaganda that is happening from all the news channels. And it's becoming harder and harder for us, but we're also seeing things like corporate unrest, boycotting, this whole thing happening within sustainability, and, you know, the climate crisis, being pulled back from that. It's one of the biggest global risks announced in the World Economic Forum 2025 report for the next 10 years. The economic downturns, there's big shifts that are about to happen. Also, I mean, if we also just look at AI and when technology is going, you know, one of the biggest challenges for an organization is change management. I think 46% of the business challenges comes from change management. So if that is the case, right, people are not trusting technology. For work, I will cut myself off. I will say what I need to say. But the moment I'm offline, I speak my truth, because it's not safe for me to speak my truth, what I really think. And people are not trusting artificial intelligence the way that it's perceived out there. And it really takes time to go through people's comments, go and look what people are actually saying about it. And this is a very interesting thing for me, because if we can't have trust in this technology that's going to take many people's jobs and not address the elephants in the room. And, you know, there's a lot of speculation. Nobody can predict the future, but we can predict the challenges. And it's those companies that are able to say, okay, right, here's all the challenges that we foresee happening in the future. How do we start working on these challenges collectively? I also think that that is an element of where trust will almost root itself and expand. But I want to quickly turn to Karina. Karina, many years ago, when I spoke at a conference, I referred to the report, and there was a insight with regards to the price on trust, and every 1% decrease has a huge financial implication. Can you maybe talk to us about that?
I'm not sure about that data point specifically, and kind of what was the background on that. But what I can say is that we know trust matters. We've been studying it for long enough, and I think doing it as a PR consultancy and reputation management consultancy, we understand that it's such an important capital for certainly organizations to have. It's probably the most important you can have with your stakeholders, because we've been able to measure the results of it. So often when we talk to our clients about how to build trust, sometimes it's about rebuilding trust, depending on where they are in their cycle and kind of what's happened to them. But yeah, basically what we're saying is that we know that trusted companies have more loyal employees, they're more engaged employees. We know that they've got more loyalty from their customers. So you're more likely to have a customer come back for repeat purchases if they trust you. We know that trusted organizations perform better on the stock market, and that they also perform better in the face of a crisis. So they're much more resilient in bouncing back from a crisis. And as I say, us sort of being in the PR communications fraternity and helping our clients navigate crises, sometimes we can see how much quicker, if that organization is operating from a position of trust already, it's an easier job. It's not to say that we should pretend like there is nothing to see here. That's not the goal, but it's about really embracing those dimensions of trust as we study it, and showing those up, bringing those to the fore. That's going to help them deal with that, and bounce back from it a lot quicker. Whereas companies who haven't spent the time to build that trust capital are going to take a lot longer to kind of get that back for themselves. So that's really kind of what's at stake, and that's where the deficits come in, Carmen. So not necessarily, I can't give you a financial figure on that, but certainly financially based in many cases, in terms of what does the value of that mean then to those organizations.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Shamila, with all the risks on the horizon that I know is happening in front of you, behind you, sideways, everywhere, in every room that you find yourself in, what's keeping you up at night? And especially around technology, data privacy, climate change, polarization, disinformation, ESG, cultural and geopolitical gaps. What's keeping you up, and how do you think it's going to impact the trust economy?
You've given the whole shopping list, Carmen. Just add hormones to that, and then you have the perfect set of them that are keeping me up at night. But just, it is so all of the above. I think for any business leader right now, a big part of what you do, even just in strategy and reflecting and, your constant feedback, you're always looking at what's happening in the environment. So there's not going to be a person in the room, I think, that doesn't feel that all of those have some or other bearing on their businesses. I think the things that we need to do is to try and look through what are the knowns and the commons that we know that will help create stability. So there's absolutely no doubt that the short term that we're seeing, and maybe even in the medium term, is a big cause of concern. And in many instances, we're having to be very reactive because of unprecedented things that are happening, or things that we're not expecting. And it could be disruptions in supply chains, or, political issues, whatever that might be. And so there is absolutely an obsession with the shorter term, and one fully understands and appreciates why that's the case. But at the same time, it's incumbent on leadership to start to see, but where is it that we need to go? And that we hold firm on the course that we need to look at. Some correction in between is necessary, as will always be for general strategy, and that's the way I look at it. So it's almost like the breathe, and breathe again. Yes, this is happening. Yes, this is crazy. But what do I need to try and look for? So where's the lines that I need to actually look at going into the future? And I think that's where the report is particularly helpful. So if you go to, I think it's page 26, and I'm going to take everything as a given, the trust issue, we're looking at businesses, and I'm going to use a business focus because that is the constituency that I work with, and we're at the intersection of business and NGO because we're a business NGO, and we work directly on the issues that are actually underlying, the distrust. And so I feel actually quite positive about the fact that we are doing the right thing. Is it difficult in this context? Absolutely. But is it necessary to get the foundation that we need for long-term resilience, competitiveness, and for a thriving society and hence business? Absolutely. So the clues for me there are not even clues. They're very clear when they're talking about people want more action on, it says affordability, issues around climate change, retraining, misinformation, and discrimination. Now, if we look at those, we talk about the DEI agenda, which has been up in the air recently for certain reasons. But then we look at the climate agenda in certain quarters that's also been contested. And you mentioned it earlier when you look at the broader kind of sustainability lens and the landscape. But what it's saying is that people want more action on that. So the report is telling you what they actually want to see more action on from a business perspective. The challenge to business is going to be how do we actually answer to that? And why it's important is that if you look at it in its simplest form, we're saying that the increase in grievance is really causing much of what we're seeing, the decrease in, the decrease in trust, all of the issues that we're having. So if we tackle the underlying and we can see some gains in those things, we will start to rebuild the trust, and hence the optimism and the decrease in, what I said earlier on, the propensity for hostile optimism, should all of them start to decrease. So working on the fundamental issues that are driving that, and that, are not an immediate kind of last 6 months thing, these are longer term things, are the things that we should be plotting our way through as well. And there's no reason that the two things can't hold true at the same time, that there's definitely a short-term pressure. but there's a long-term view that you still have to hold with that. And again, like I say, it's not easy from a leadership perspective, but if we're saying society is putting that trust in business, as the indicators are saying to us, and businesses, NGOs as the two top there, then it makes it very clear that trying to keep that agenda going and being clear about what is necessary to keep that fabric is going to be the thing that's going to help us there. And so there, for me, is actually a level of optimism, because I think it's quite clear about the things that we need to hold. So if I look at that, yes, it might keep you awake at night, but let's look through that as to how we can start to change that. It does mean that we need to be patient. It does mean that we've got to try and be clear as we can in the current context as to where that needs to go. And if I look at this, I mean, look at South Africa. If we talk about discrimination, if we talk about issues of affordability, climate change, these are not things that are new to us. But it just reiterates for me that leadership needs to stand behind these issues, because these are critical. And of the 5 that I mentioned, or 6, those are all so important. And I reflect on the work that we do as the NBI as well, directly working in reskilling and retraining and looking at where the economy can go and where competitiveness can come from. So these issues are so tightly intersected from a systems change perspective, from what we're seeing globally, but keeping to the fundamentals that need to hold true while some of the other things move around is going to be critical. So I think, yes, a lot to keep us awake, but a lot that we can actually start to say, let's double down on these issues and find our way through them. You know, sometimes the narrative might have to change slightly or whatever might be the case, but I think it is the moment for the stronger leadership. It is the moment to really, I think, show to society that from what the barometer says has been the trust that's been put in us, that we actually earn and deserve it.
Yeah. And I love that you're saying it. We need bold leaders now. This is what we need more than ever. Fortified, strong, bold, to take up action. And although there are many pressing issues, if you have the right kind of leadership, and this is why we need conscious leaders in the space and leading into the future, because that is what we need, is to make decisions for everybody, for those people that are not in the room as well. You know, Bushley, I would love to hear your take on the issues on trust and what keeps you up at night, dealing with a lot of shareholders and stakeholders in your day-to-day, very much involved in, you know, the restructuring and business transformation, is to also look at trust not necessarily being the polyfiller effect. Are we building trust just to make money, but it's not a long-term goal, or are we actually pulling up sleeves and doing the work that needs to get done, knowing that we might not make enough revenue right now, but if we do the right things right now, we will see the dividends in the future. What is your take on that?
Sure. You know, I kept on nodding as my fellow panelists were talking, because they really are spot on. And what came to mind, and I was thinking about it now as we're chatting, that we really need to go back to basics, Carmen. This really, you know, this conversation is really reminding me of a time where the profession that I belonged to, the chartered accountancy, was in turmoil, because some of our members were found wanting during state capture, being involved in very shady and fraudulent activities. And in all honesty, everybody knew that CAs in South Africa were the trusted professions all over the world. I mean, people were outsourcing from our databases to get CFOs, CEOs, everybody. We were literally regarded as, you know, as a top profession in the world. Yes, we have worked hard in the last few years to recover, and we are back to being number one again. But I remember being interviewed at CNBC Africa about exactly that, to say, how do we now trust you guys? How do we now encourage our young people? How do we encourage our kids to enter this profession if you guys now are the ones that are supposed to be doing the audits and finding wrong things, but actually you are the ones that are doing things? I mean, one of our fellow professionals actually was auditing a company and was also VBS, but also had loans at VBS. That's serious conflict of interest. And I know that sometimes if you're sitting in a board, they'll say, oh, declarations of interest, and that's it, and you just note it, and it's probably not enough anymore. We need to be able to say, okay, yes, you've declared your interest. What does this mean? Does it mean now you actually have to step down? So a simple thing coming, I joined, I was the CFO of an automotive company, having a good time, sitting on boards, get to BDO. I'm excited. I'm going to be leading this restructuring team. And then voila, the risk department says, Buhle, you have to let go of your shares in 1 and 2. Buhle, you have to let go of your directorship in 1 and 2. Buhle, you have to let go of your board seat in 1 and 2. I'm like, hey, what's going on? I'm not the richest person in the world. It's not like I own 95% of shares in this business. Why? They're like, Buhle, the minute you have any kind of interest in a business that we're auditing, we're stuffed, right? I was like, I'm on 0.0. I'm busy creating wealth for my daughter. I'm creating a trust fund. Now, all of a sudden, you have to make the decision then come in to say, do I really want to be, as my previous CEO at the IDC would say, Buhle, do you want to be in the Sunday Times, front page of the Sunday Times this week? Huh? Do you want to be? So that's something that I always worry about in every decision that I make is, will a person hire Buhle to go and turn around their business if Buhle has been reported to have a shareholding in a company that BDO audits? And it's simple, it's basics coming. If you've got that direct or even indirect conflict in a business, you are not supposed to form part of it if it's being audited by your own company. I know it sounds like a simple example, but the reality is, because credibility is so important in my line of work, in my personal capacity, I can't always be found wanting. So simple things like that, where you have to let go of an opportunity, or where you were investing, you have to just say, what is the right thing to do? And I think it's as simple as that. There's no gray area. It's black or white. That's just simple.
That is so profound. I think one thing that stands out for me here with what you've just shared is the importance of critical thinking, because your team had your back also, and to say, listen, foresight, let's apply foresight intelligence here just for a second. If you sit on all these boards, because I know you sat on so many boards, if you sit on all of these boards and you're auditing also those boards, it's a big challenge. And this is so important that the team that you surround yourself also has your back, and that the decisions and the integrity and how the business leads is paramount, because that is how trust is restored, and that is investment into trust and making the right decisions. Something very interesting. I mean, like, we're over 6,000 women in our community now, and it's ever growing, and it's quite phenomenal. I learned so much from women, you ladies as well. Like, it's just like this critical thinking around everything that's happening. And something that really interests me was when this concept of due diligence was introduced to me from the ESG goals and the sustainability goals.
Very important concept.
Hey, it's around, right? Like, it's literally sustainability reports. I want to see the fiscal report. I want to see all the fiscal reports, run it through ChatGPT. Then I want to do due diligence. I want to understand, on which sustainability development goals are being invested, how much is being invested, and the research that goes in from a consumer perspective. And then when I'm very much involved working in marketing, technology, and innovation. And I can tell you this much, is that consumers are citizen journalists. They are no longer just going to a company's website page. They are researching through AI. They are researching the stakeholders. They are researching the shareholders, anything that I found, everything that happened there on the other side, that country over there, everything that happened there started like the citizen journalist explosion of consumers messaging me directly and saying to me, Carmen, have you seen, I've put this through AI. These are companies within South Africa that is sitting on these boards. These people are involved and shareholders. Can you please talk about this? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't want to put my foot into all of this information, but I am absolutely blown away to see how AI has enabled people to do research, and they don't go into Google anymore. the AI is not saying good things about you, you've got a problem. So this is also leading into challenges that organizations will have in building trust, is also what's true and what's not, and the critical thinking that would need to be shaped there. And I think for all of us, it's a call to critical thinkers, and not just think that just because we put a prompt into ChatGPT that it's true. But there is also the other side of real things that are happening in real research, and that is shaping how people look at companies and trust companies. So Karina, I'm actually going to put this one in your court. Please don't throw me with a tennis ball. So with all the changes that are happening, so a lot of research studies come from the States and from America, and they dominate research, and that research shapes how companies put their strategies together, how they innovate, how they put things into the world. But now we are seeing from universities, there are many, many, many words that are not allowed to be used, like women, people of color, DEI, all of those kind of things. And the immediate thing that makes me concerned about this is the integrity of research reports. Where are they being housed? Where are they being put together? What is your view? Because for everything starts with research. It shapes everything, and it could actually steer political agendas on the other side without us even being aware of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a good question, and I think it does often come down to the integrity of these reports, and anybody, I guess, can do a survey. You could do a Survey Monkey and say, I've done this piece of research that told me this. So the sampling, the methodology, everything has to be extremely robust and rigorous. We work specifically for the Edelman Trust Barometer. We work through our sort of independent team that's appointed by Edelman, called the Edelman Trust Institute. It's literally in their name, to conduct this research. What's really great about the reports that we do, though, and I mentioned the country reports, is that we use local on-the-ground providers in those markets, and also using the language, the local language of the market, to be able to conduct those results. So there is always a lens of a local context in the studies that come up, which is why we do those specific reports. So for example, in the South Africa Trust report, you would have seen that we were one of only 2 countries to increase our levels of trust in government after the elections of last year. There were over 50 countries that went to the elections, and we were one of only 2 whose trust in government went up after our elections. I think Argentina was the other one. So that one data point has quite an important bearing on how we then think about the rest of the research. Because now we're looking at it with a different lens, with a bit more of a contextual lens. That all being said, I think that the global impact and influence and halo is very important, and we cannot ignore that. I think sometimes it is tempting to look at our local market context and be very myopic in that view, but we would be silly and naive, I think, to do that, Carmen. I mean, look at what's happening in the US at the moment. Every decision that's being taken is having a ripple effect into almost every part of the world. So I think the same is true for when we go back and we do studies. There has to be some sort of grounding based on what we are seeing in the macroeconomic environment, and largely that macroeconomic environment is dictated to us by the leading economies of the world. So you'll see sometimes the data points are different for one-party states. Like China has a very interesting set of results that they deliver from a trust perspective, given how their country is governed, etc. But I think it is important to take that into account. And to think about that influence. But I think in terms of bias, through the methodology, the sampling, take the sort of guiding principle around how trusted is this institution to do the right thing. And that for me is universal. And if we use that universal foundation from which to do our research with different types of people around the world, then we're getting the best possible data points.
Wonderfully answered. Thank you so much, and putting our minds at ease. Shamila, I want to pick your brain. How do we embed trust in our organizations? What is the starting point? Where do we start so that at least that we know where we are at, that we are continuously working at building trust in the right way?
Thank you, Carmen. And before I get to that, I just want to make a correction. I think earlier I talked about a decline in business. It wasn't business trust, it was employer trust. And there's a distinction between the two. When the trust in business went up. So that's the first thing. You need to trust me that I read the report properly. So on the one on building organizational trust, there's so many dimensions to trust. And, you know, at the most basic level, it's consistency, right? Do what you say you're going to do, and so that people can see that their action meets the speak, right? So it's not about talking, it's about doing. And I think Bushle completely agree with Bushle's comment in the chat as well around that. So what does that mean though? Because you can be consistent about the wrong thing. And it's about understanding what it is that's necessary for the trust. So firstly, I think it will come down to ethics, integrity, and in values, and the values that your organization espouses. Every organization has fantastic value statements, but in many organizations, particularly where there's growing mistrust, is where there's not an alignment with the leader's behavior and what that organization is espousing to stand for. Or even worse, where sometimes the leaders are aligned on what they're saying, but it's out of touch with what the rest of the organization is actually feeling. And, you know, I have to say, as the person who leads an organization myself, and this is, I think, somewhat a little bit understanding of leadership, is that you're always constantly insecure about whether you're being told the truth about what is going on in your organization. Because there's inherent biases and one needs to be aware of those. And so as a leader, you need to seek out the channels that can get you to firstly understand the reality of what is going on in your business so that you're able to take the right action to then consistently apply them, whether to rebuild the trust or to maintain it if that is good. And so I think the first thing is that yourself as a leader to be conscious of your own behavior and your biases, to understand the information sources. And remember, age of disinformation, let's not think that that doesn't exist in our own organizations. And there's different levels of that. So those for me would be things I would, at the least, the very least, we need to start with looking at. And consistency then, like I said, is key. We can't be making one decision this week and it's to have this effect, and the next week you're doing the completely opposite thing. You do start to create mistrust and chaos within your own organization. That doesn't bode well for then how that organization works outside and with your member, your client base, or whatever that might be. And so that internal trust building is going to be critical on those areas. Then when we come to external trust, again, you know, I suppose the one single source that you see is what you report on. And I'm just going to go there. Of course, your behavior is critical when it comes to the trust that you engender with people out there. And similar elements, it's consistency. Can I trust that you're going to do what you say you're going to do? Is it going to be on time? The basic, simple things like that. As in a relationship with anybody, you know, how do you build that? But the other elements of trust is that when you stand up and you stand, what do you stand for? Are those things that resonate and are the right things in your context? That can then get societal trust, but also trust across the businesses that you deal with or the consumer base that you deal with. And are you close to those things? So keeping close to it, which is just should be standard practice for any business, to constantly be in touch with what your stakeholders need and ensure that your messaging aligns with that, but that you actually believe it. Because very quickly, as you've pointed out, and as Bruce has pointed out, people start to understand when you're not consistent with what you're saying, you know, where the brand promise, for example, is not aligning with what they're seeing in practice on the ground. And that's when you can start eroding trust first. And of course, you know, from there becomes quite a downward spiral. And a quick comment on reporting. I think that, you know, it's easy to get good report writers and to write the fancy reports and put the pretty pictures in. But I'm going to draw very quickly on my background, looking at integrated reporting, for example, and look at the guidelines and the principles around that actually give us good clues for what builds trust. Because what you want is the consumers of that information, and hence the consumers of your brand promise, to be able to say, okay, this is consistent, this is what it stands for, this is how I can see that practically coming through. So the need to own your story is very important, and the critical leadership thinking in that regard. So this integrated thinking around these issues has to come through, because with the integrated thinking, you'll be able to see very clearly how that brand then understands the issues, acts on them, and therefore becomes trusted because it itself is displaying that. So disjuncture in reporting, often is a symptom of a lack of integrated thinking and ability to understand and respond to the societal norms and the changes that we're seeing. But on the other side, to be able to also take your vantage point and use it as a leadership opportunity, because with things you could say, hey, we actually can effect change on these things. And how do we then do that? So the consistent story, owning that story and being able to do that continuously becomes important. A side effect of that is that you're probably better able to navigate when it feels like there's chaos, because you've actually held your story strong and true and have gone through the leadership pain of making sure we understand what we're about as a business. And then within that, obviously, is that the leaders themselves have had that same conversation with themselves and are able to come fully authentic, fully present, and be able to show up in a way that doesn't need the glossies to make the case.
Thank you so much. Shania Aching, I think that Shamila has answered your question around, in this era where misinformation is rampant and public trust in institutions is declining, what specific strategies can organizations implement to rebuild and maintain trust among their stakeholders? I think Shamila has answered that beautifully. I think, Bushli, also just moving into strategies, how does our strategies need to align in order to build trust and the trust economy internally and externally?
Look, I was even responding now to Shania's question on exactly that. I think it's important, Carmen, to be accountable at all times. What helps me, when I sit as an independent board member in any company, I do make sure that those strategies that have been put in place are aligned to the values of the business, right? And you must always hold management accountable. It's not an easy thing, because as much as we're saying, yes, we need those board members to be there to evaluate what management is doing, sometimes what you get on the board pack won't necessarily be what's sitting underneath. Disgruntled employees. When I was looking at the report, Karina, the term grievance is such a critical term, because when you are grieved, that means you're really frustrated in an environment. You are not happy, and that's why even sitting as a leader in a business, when I see an employee coming in and saying, "Oh, I've got a grievance towards a certain individual or certain team leader," I get worried, because that means that person is really frustrated in whatever form it comes. It may be something as small as not being accounted for a result that was great for the business. Somebody's taking advantage of their leadership role, things like that. Those are some of the things that we see. But I think what's important is to always ask the questions. Ask, how are you able to demonstrate that whatever you've put in as a goal or as a plan or as a strategy for the business is actually being implemented accordingly? And whilst you're doing the implementation, are you not stepping on people's toes? Are you doing the right thing? Are you taking care of your people? Are you following the right procedures and processes? So simple things as that, where you are actually holding leaders and management accountable. I think for me, it's very critical, and it will help you to sort of evaluate the effectiveness of any actions that the business is implementing. So it's a tough one, Carmen, but I think what's important is that what you probably would regard as a simple thing, reporting lines. There has to be reporting lines. There has to be segregation of duties, so that you are able to trust the information that you're getting at any level. It's actually very important. So that's why I think even earlier I said going back to basics is probably one of the biggest things that we need to do. So, for instance, let's talk about what you touched on. Do we trust AI? I think there's also a question on the chat around that. Now, guys, I'm all about it. I want anything that's going to help me not to take enough long time. I'm a millennial, but I still do believe I'm an old school girl who wants to still do the research, check, double check, triple check. But at the same time, I want somebody who's going to help me to finish the report on time so that I'm able to, to go present whatever I need to do. So I need to understand things, but at the same time, was embracing the changes and what the future holds. Because if I don't embrace the future or what AI brings into our world, then I'm going to be left behind. But the reality is that it does come with its own risks. Cyber attacks. I mean, it was so strange that cyber security was not even an issue 10 years ago. But now it's become such a big thing. And I think maybe 10 years ago, cyber security was an issue for financial institutions. But now it's actually a problem for everybody, because getting access to somebody's information where they stay, where they work, there's risks to that. But what I'm getting at, Carmen, is that we have to embrace change. We have to embrace what will make us a more productive society. And what will make us to be able to be trusted. One of the biggest things for me, one of the questions was around, how do you create trust in leadership? And reality is, if people see you doing wrong things, then you are not trustworthy. Do you know how many times, Carmen, I go into a financial institution to go ask to turn around some of their distressed clients that are sitting on their maybe watch list, and they say, oh, but we don't like turnaround specialists or business rescue practitioners because you guys put companies into business rescue and you never take them out. But that's a sad reality for me, because the bad apples in any profession will always create this mistrust, and as a result, we won't get the opportunities that we need. And companies will struggle because I'm not getting in there on time, because I'm still dilly-dallying with the leaders in place, trying to prove that I can actually do the work. So if you're not trusted, nobody's going to give you the work that you need to do.
Absolutely love that. I see our time has just like gone, right? I just want to say thank you to our audience. Thank you for Shamila, Bushle, and also Karina for checking the chat while we're busy and throwing that and synthesizing and bringing it all in. That's what women do, right? We collaborate and we take and have each other's backs. So thank you so much for that. But I almost want to bring it all together. I think the biggest thing, just with regards to something you said, Bushle, around AI and using AI, because our future depends on it. But I think also the caveat to that is also to know that AI is your ship, and you take the ship out to sea. As Simon Sinek said in a recent podcast with the Diary of a CEO. However, when the storm comes, you must know how to survive and swim. And it's important to realize that AI is an enabler. It is a voice in the room, but it's a voice of the collective. And it's important to also recognize that you still need to think. You still need to outsource your thinking. To not outsource your thinking, you still need to think on your own and not outsource all of your thinking. I mean, right now, the emotional intelligence of machines are higher, and they don't even have emotional intelligence, are higher than human beings. And I think there's a 50% difference. So it's very important not to lose your humanity, your human connection in this age of artificial intelligence, and know that you need to embrace your authentic intelligence in the age of artificial intelligence. And then I want to close off with, and what trust reminds me of, and hopefully this will stick in your minds. But if we look at an egg, right? When a chicken is about to hatch, right? If that egg was trust, when trust is broken and it impacts people on the outside, when that egg gets broken from the outside, it means death. But when you crack an egg from the inside, it means life. So if we as organizations and as institutions, NPOs, NGOs, work on trust, and trust is a daily practice, not just as an organization, but as an individual, you bring life, and you bring life to all the negativity that we're seeing out there. Just don't be on the wrong side of trust. And yeah, that is pretty much what I wanted to say. And then do you have any final thoughts, Karina, Shamila, Bushle, before we close off?
Thanks so much for the opportunity. Yeah, I think just to say, and lots of key actions, and I'm very happy to also, if anybody wants to reach out, we've got lots of suggestions of how to build this trust, and it's all well and good for us to tell you all the reasons why it's difficult, but we're very happy to help share some of those suggestions with you. But I think just to leave you with a quote from Yuval Harari, who's a historian. Some of you may follow some of his work, but he spoke about the fact that it doesn't seem to be any leadership for humanity at the moment. And I think as we get caught up in the science around these things, it's always good to remember in this volatile time where everything just feels like it's not as human-centered as it used to be. It certainly doesn't feel like that to me at the moment. As leaders, how do we consciously try and be more for humanity? I think that'll help us in the future. Yeah.
Love that. Jamila?
Okay, happy to go. Thank you, Carmen. And I think the report on page 35 is quite a powerful bit to finish on, which said influence will go more through compassion than through power. And I think it's a longer road, but reflecting on the point that Karina made now around humanity, I think that actually resonates perhaps the strongest and has a lot in terms of the clues for how we need to be approaching the communication on it and the action.
Love it. Push.
Yeah, no, those are so good. Look, I think for me, coming, to build trust and to be able to do the work that needs to be done, it's on everybody's shoulders. I think having a positive outlook to life is how I live my life. And what's important is for us to all get our hands dirty and just do what needs to be done and do the right thing. Thank you.
I absolutely love that. Let's just go out there and just do what we know is the right thing. And it all starts within, right? Audacious, inside out. Anyway, from my side, thank you so much for everybody joining today. It's always so amazing to have the community join us for these very important conversations. Please follow us on LinkedIn. We've got a lot of activities and exciting webinars and workshops coming up. And then also subscribe to the podcast. There we tackle very real life things that needs to be addressed for conscious leaders, and then also on Instagram. So thank you so much to everybody for being part of this. And then to our amazing panelists, I have so much love and respect for you. And I just thank you for being part of this journey and for always just raising your hands and saying, I want to be part of that. I want to have input. I'm there for you. I'm there for the community. So thank you so much to each one of you for being part of this today. I really appreciate you.
Thank you, Carmen.
Carmen, and to everyone who listened in.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.